Welcome back again to the book log, everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about Player Piano by Kurt Vonnegut. This book is interesting to me for several reasons. First, it's interesting in the context of Kurt Vonnegut's career. This is his first novel, and it was released 7 years before his second novel, which kind of places it on its own chronological island at a very early stage in his career. Because of this, you can really sense the inception of some of the things he does incredibly well as a writer. At the same time, there are a few noticeable differences. You can tell he was still developing his style and his narrative voice, which he hadn't quite perfected yet. So many trademark Vonnegut elements are here. It's still incredibly sharp and biting and clever. There's a lot of satire and black humor woven throughout, but there are also some things that feel distinct from the work he'd go on to produce later in his career. The story is more linear, it's more plot-driven, and the writing's a tiny bit clunky in places, but the promise is absolutely there, the ideas are there, and in terms of mid-century sci-fi dystopia, this is possibly the most prescient book I've ever read. The story is set in a near-future America from the perspective of the 1950s, where nearly all labor has been replaced by machines, which leaves most of the population without meaningful work. Society is divided into two main classes. You have the elite engineers and managers who design and maintain the machines, and then everyone else who are just kind of rendered obsolete and useless and shuffled into either the army or the Reconstruction and Reclamation Corps, also called the Reeks and Recs, which is basically a government-run organization made up of the rest of the unemployed masses. They're assigned manual labor, like cleaning up rubble or maintaining unused roads, essentially just to keep them busy and out of trouble. The imbalance between the amount of work to be done and the number of Reeks and Recs assigned to do it is highlighted repeatedly. There are scenes where 40 people are lined up just to fill a single pothole. Automation has become so widespread that there simply isn't enough meaningful work to go around. Machines do almost everything. It's kind of like Brave New World with robots replacing human agency instead of a drug. The protagonist is Dr. Paul Proteus, who is a respected engineer and manager at the Ilium Works in New York State. Despite being one of the few people who actually has a secure job, mainly because his father was an important engineer, Paul becomes increasingly disillusioned with this system. He kind of finds himself at a crossroads where he's up for a major promotion that would cement his place among the elite, but he is also tempted to quit and just walk away from it all. His old friend Ed Finnerty shows up, who's this other former engineer, and he has recently quit the system and has embraced this freer lifestyle and existence on the margins of society. And when the two reconnect, Paul begins questioning his own career as well as the entire machine-run society that he ostensibly helps to uphold in general. Eventually, throughout the book, Paul is drawn into this secret underground resistance movement, which is just led by average people who are trying to take back control from the machines and give their lives purpose again. Like I said earlier, this whole idea of Player Piano is impressively prescient given that it was written in the 1950s, long before modern computers or artificial intelligence were around in any capacity, and yet Vonnegut is somehow able to foresee all of these pitfalls that might come with this sort of reliance on technology. The more work that's automated, the less of a role people have in society, and all of a sudden everything just becomes robots doing tasks for other robots, which is 75% of what the internet is right now. Just a pointless stripping of purpose from the world, replacing meaning with garbage. And then on top of that, you also have the idea that in such a world, only a tiny group of elite managers and engineers would live with any degree of agency. I think another thing Vonnegut gets right about all this is how the machines, in many ways, aren't even that much of an improvement over human labor. In fact, in a lot of ways, they're actually worse. There was a small section I found funny where this guy is talking about automated traffic director machines advising a stray dog running nearby to not drive drunk, only later to advise an actual drunk driver that all bicycles require reflectors. Just completely missing the mark on what is its actual function, absurd and inefficient and totally disconnected from human reality. Even the military in this world is pointlessly automated, and even though it's just robots fighting other robots, humans are still somehow caught up and forced to suffer alongside the machines. Vonnegut also pretty much predicts ChatGPT. There's this whole section about a machine called Epicac that humanity uses to ask questions and and it spits out answers about what they should do. In this book, Ipecac is treated almost like a god, or at least like a supreme oracle of reason or something. All decisions are made based on the precise mathematical calculations of this machine, so labor isn't just replaced, but the entire mechanism for determining anything at all is replaced. Every member of society is processed through a series of computations based on their IQ and other traits and issued a literal card that dictates all sorts of facets of their life. For example, when you buy a house, a machine scans your card and determines exactly which appliances you should own or which area you should live. Even creative fields are subject to this process, like machines use statistics to predict which books or paintings will appeal to you, so your tastes are curated in advance. The system is used to tailor essentially every component of your life, all in the name of efficiency. The book also includes a pretty interesting, albeit somewhat random, B-plot involving a man called the Shah of Bratpur, who is the political leader of some fictional country, clearly just based on India. He and his translator/nephew Kashdrar are taken on a tour across America where they're shown all the supposed improvements brought about by total mechanization. A lot of the section is played for comedy, but Vonnegut also uses these two characters to more directly critique the absurdity of the whole system. Like, even though they're these foreign dignitaries, they kind of function as stand-ins for the reader, just experiencing and reacting to this automated society with exasperation and confusion. One recurring gag is that the Shah doesn't understand the difference between a citizen and a slave, so he just refers to everyone he meets as Takaru, which means slave in his language. It starts off as a comedic bit, but as the story goes on, it kind of becomes harder to argue with his perspective, considering how little agency the average American seems to have in this rigid machine society. One other thing I appreciated about this book is that there are several little vignette sections where Vonnegut zooms into other unique ways the system affects the ways people live their lives. There's this guy named Elfie who makes his living off of bar bets, where he's able to correctly identify which song is being played on the TV when it's muted, like going based on the movements of the musician's hands. There's a football coach who's trying to convince a new recruit to come play for his college by insinuating that it's a much easier life to get a big scholarship right now than to deal with whatever remnants are left over from the actual workforce, which is like nothing. There's a haircut guy who boasts that his job is one of the few that can't actually be easily replaced by machines, although he did know of one haircut man who accidentally dreamed a machine that could do automated haircuts, thus putting himself out of a job. In fact, a pretty major theme of the story is how people can't help but replace themselves with machines. They just do it all the time as if it's human nature. This leads me to the ending of this book, which I have somewhat mixed feelings about. Paul and his little ragtag group of revolutionaries, the Ghost Shirt Society is what they call themselves, ultimately fail in their attempt to meaningfully disrupt the system. Their whole rebellion ends up just being an entirely useless, destructive, directionless mess. It's just complete idealistic catharsis with no real strategy or vision. The people smash all the machines, including the few actually useful ones, and then they just have no idea what to do next. And after the dust settles, as people are sifting through the wreckage, they start just rebuilding the machines that they just destroyed. It's a pretty bleak, pessimistic conclusion that humanity is just trapped in this cycle, and that even when given the chance to reclaim agency, people will always just gravitate back towards the same mechanisms that alienate them in the first place. That's how deeply programmed society has become to prioritize efficiency over everything. And this book was written in the 1950s, which is pretty astonishing, honestly. I don't think this is Kurt Vonnegut's best book, but it might be his most prophetic book, or maybe uncanny is a better word for it. It doesn't quite have the effortless emotional brilliance of some of his best work. It's got a bit of a weird narrative rhythm, and you can tell that he was still honing and developing his skills as a writer in a lot of ways. It's rough around the edges in some places, but I think it makes up for all of that with the sheer clarity of its vision. He somehow saw the writing on the wall for a lot of this stuff so far in advance. It has a shockingly modern sense of alienation and malaise and anxiety. It's sad in a lot of ways, but it's also kind of reassuring. Our problems aren't always as novel or as existential as they seem. Or maybe they are, but either way, it's something that we've always done and we will always have to keep doing. I'm going to give this book an 8.